We kindly ask that everyone mutes their microphone unless they are speaking. We've got two ground rules just to make the session run smoothly. The first one is only one person speaks at a time. So just remember to be respectful of one another. Number two is if the discussion associated with a specific question goes beyond a reasonable time, I'll just give a warning signal indicating that the person has about 10 seconds to wrap up their comments. That being said, my introduction. Rachel is a diabetes technologist and researcher. She works with the Team Tang lab. That's my lab. And all of our research assistants are on screen. She worked as a research assistant, but otherwise you might see her at BC Diabetes, consulting both patients and clinicians across Canada as an expert in open source AID systems and individualized diabetes care. Outside of appointments, she is spearheading clinical trials at BC Diabetes, dedicated to exploring the clinical outcomes of the newest diabetes technology. Now I'm going to hand it over to Rachel.
All right, I've got my slides up. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I was actually going to mention that I don't know, I realize I'm like representing BC Diabetes a little bit, and I don't know if my boss knows, but he has just joined the chat as well. So hi, Dr. Elliott.
Hi, Rachel. I'm not
Hi.
going to say, I've never attended Huddle, so I'm going to just shut up and say goodbye.
Fantastic. So, yeah, again, welcome. So after Terry's discussion last time, she went pretty in depth into some of the commercial options. I just wanted to kind of introduce the open source world to everyone. Just because some people might be joining us for the first time this week as well, I did want to kind of do an introduction to automation. So some of you might know this bit already. Then we'll discuss kind of the open source options, go into some of the features, compare and contrast between open source and commercial so that you're kind of left knowing what are the best options for you, how to seek out resources for what's going on as well. All right, so I do have a, oops, let me change the slide here. I do have a disclosure slide. It's pretty boring. I am not paid by any companies to be here tonight. I also have never been paid by any pump companies to talk about their pumps. My goal is really not to sway you towards one pump system or another. I am employed by BC Diabetes. My qualifications are that I talk about this every day. I've put about 250 people on loop myself, so spend my 9 to 5 talking about it. But I'm not a nurse, not a physician, so take my opinion as you will. All right, so I did want to start with the most basic. So I'm sure everyone knows about MDI. It's the most basic way of managing your insulin. If you are put on insulin as someone with diabetes, you have a long-acting, short-acting insulin where something like a Tresiba or a Basaglar, it's a once daily shot. You have that super flat line there acting as your basal rate in the background to keep you at your baseline blood sugar throughout the day. And then you take something like Admelog or Trurapi for your meal insulin and correction. So then your kind of spikes of insulin look like that throughout the day. The unfortunate part is our blood sugars levels don't really look like this. Wouldn't it be great if they were just kind of up, down, and then with meals up, down, and then steady the whole night while you're asleep? The benefit of choosing just a regular insulin pump, something that doesn't automate would be to have a little more variation in the mix. So something like that little, you can see at the bottom of that graph, the little orange line up and down. With a traditional insulin pump, you're replacing that long-acting with a short-acting insulin that slowly infuses in you. So you have the opportunity to lower your insulin for things like activity, you can raise them when you feel like you're going to eat every day. So if I eat every day at 6, I can have a bit of a slightly higher basal rate then. I don't have to just adjust kind of my overall basal throughout the entire day. So that's the nice thing. And then with traditional insulin pumps, you're always looking at your blood sugars, you're seeing that you're high, but nothing happens unless you use your brain. You think, okay, I'm high right now. I need a little extra insulin. So I'm going to put a little extra insulin in my pump. Then the insulin goes into your body, your blood sugars go down, hopefully. And then ideally, if you're kind of around target, great. But then, as a lot of you know, sometimes you go a little too low. So then you take some fast-acting carb, and then you're thinking, okay, I'm getting a low alert now. So I'm gonna take some fast-acting carb, go up. If I'm high again, I'm gonna take some insulin and go down. And that's kind of like an up, down every day. And those are all little tiny micro decisions you're making throughout the day. So then, that I'm sure a lot of you have heard the statistic, people with diabetes make like 180 health-related decisions a day. The idea with automated insulin delivery is to take away some of those decisions from you. The most basic ones where it's like blood sugar is high, so I need to take more insulin. Hopefully, at least that is taken away from you. So with an automated system, that describes any insulin pump that'll look at your blood sugars as they're coming in every 5 minutes. And based on those blood sugars, if your blood sugar is high, it'll give you some more insulin on top of your basal without you having to touch the pump, without you having to look at it. If your blood sugars are kind of heading on their way down to a low, it'll try to suspend your insulin ahead of time. So that means you're kind of catching some of those highs, catching those lows without having to do that yourself. Instead of making 180 decisions a day, the algorithm is doing those adjustments for you, and hopefully you're not having to think about that all too much. So yeah, sensor reads blood sugar, algorithm would calculate the dose, pump delivers your insulin. It thinks about your all of those factors like insulin on board, carbs on board, all of that, so that you don't have to think about it for you. This is generally what we call a closed loop, just because it's kind of like a loop. Your sensor, your pod, sensor, pod kind of makes a loop. Specifically, though, it's called a hybrid closed loop, just clearing up some of the verbiage around there, just because some people get it kind of mixed up. There's a lot of things out there. Hybrid being that you have to enter in your carbs with a lot of these systems that we have right now. So fully closed loop would be ideally like, it's like a pancreas. It does everything on its own. You don't have to tell it any information, and it adjusts your insulin up and down. Hybrid meaning we have to enter in carbs and meals. Some people call this an artificial pancreas, but some people call it looping as well. And looping generally specifically refers to the open source side, just because there's an app called Loop that we use within that. Some people say looping as like all the automated systems on its own. So just kind of to clarify that, today I'll be using looping to only describe the open source systems. I'd like to call all automated systems just automated pumps. Okay, so then with automated pumps, when we get those machines making all those tiny decisions for us, we get a lot more variation. So on the bottom, I don't want you to look at the numbers too closely, just look at the kind of variation of the insulin there. So you see those kind of blue bars going up and down. The taller the blue, the more insulin. So you can see all those tiny, tiny variations in that basal rate there versus what we get up top. That's what automated insulin is doing for you. So every 5 minutes, it's making those decisions, adjusting your insulin. I hope you're not making decisions about your insulin like this. That would drive me nuts. So yeah, but automated insulin is just taking some of that burden off of you. However, automated insulin does help with day-to-day variation. So if you're, for example, one day you're eating at a certain time, I'm sure a lot of you have been told, oh, you went low with your blood sugar today because we have your basal rates up at 6 p.m. and you're supposed to eat then. If you didn't eat, you're going to go low. With automation, the idea is that it helps with that kind of variation without you having to plan your meals around your diabetes, for example. So you can see in this example here, again, don't look too closely at the numbers, just more blues, more insulin. Those are blood sugar dots up at the top, and then red bars are meals. So you can see this person, this is a real night scout graph, someone using Loop. You can see they had a meal here and then had a meal here on Friday. And then Saturday, they had a lot more carbs late in the afternoon. They did go low a little bit, maybe bolus a little too much because they told it 40 grams of carbs and they ate 10. That's a limitation of these automated systems. But generally, you can see in the morning, they might have forgotten to put in their carbs. So they might have eaten, forgot to put it in, or maybe their blood sugar rose for any of the 42 reasons on the right there. If you're ever have those days where like my blood sugar is rising, I don't know why. Yeah, automation can help with that just because it raises your insulin doses without you having to touch it. You can see that high, whether it was forgotten carb or just stress or like taking some medications. It was taken care of really, really well there. So automated insulin, like I mentioned, it's not magic. So that little low there was an example of a fault with automation. It's not perfect just because it adjusts insulin based on CGM readings and based on what you tell it. So it does put up guardrails. It adjusts your insulin for you to reduce highs and reduce lows, but it's not going to prevent them all. For example, if you tell it you ate 40 grams of carbs and then you didn't eat that 40 grams of carbs, you've already got that insulin. It can't take it away, but you can see it can stop your insulin for you. But with automated insulin, things like going out for activity does tend to be a lot easier just because it can suspend your insulin, even if you're at a 10, but going down. But if you have 5 units on board because you just bolus for a meal and then you're going out to go on a run, probably not going to save you there. So it is still kind of limited in what we can do with the technology we have right now, but versus non-automated pumps, we do get better time and range. The studies massively show that we get better time and range, less low events, better quality of life, just as importantly, just because we get less low alerts, you're thinking about your diabetes less. One of the places that we see the best benefits are overnight. So better sleep means just better health outcomes overall. That's a really, really big point that most people go on automation for. Yeah, otherwise limitations can include that CGM accuracy. So if you're someone whose CGM never stays on, automation probably isn't for you just because you might, like not be in automated mode all the time. Other factors like the 42 on the right there, it can't adjust for everything. It can react to your blood sugars, but it can't proactively predict that your blood sugars are gonna rise because you're gonna be a little more stressed tomorrow, right? So those are the kind of things you want to tell the system about. Otherwise, input accuracy, like putting in 40 grams of carbs when you eat 10, that's going to affect your blood sugars. And then things like pump failure still happen on automated insulin. But overall, we do see better results. I think Terry touched on this last time as well, but I also personally have never seen anyone try an automated system and do worse. So yeah, the studies prove it. Anyone who's struggling with their diabetes comes back with really, really great results. There's tons and tons of options out there for automated systems. These are just the systems available in Canada. So Terry talked about the ones on the left. Those are the commercial systems. So when I say commercial systems, I mean systems that come from a big pump company, big pharmaceutical company. They put it out, they distribute it through commercial means, like you can get them covered by insurance. They come out of the box already ready to automate, so you don't have to do any fiddling around with it. You have a pump trainer from the pump company who's paid to train you. And you get tons of support on that side. Your endocrinologist is going to be able to talk to you about all those options. On the right, we have the open source options. So these are the systems you can't get from a pump company, and I'll explain that a little bit more, but we'll go all the way to the beginning to kind of tell you about why these exist. Okay, you can see back in 2013, for commercial options, we just had the Medtronic that wasn't really automated. It just suspended your basals, but it didn't give you any extra insulin at all. Basically, people online kind of got fed up with it and thought, no, we can definitely do this better. We're just kind of held back by what the industry can do, approvals and things like that. So basically, there's a movement online with a bunch of people who had diabetes themselves, coders, very techie people. They kind of hacked the Medtronic pump at the time so that their computers can adjust insulin based on their CGM readings. So credits to Dr. Elliott. I took these two pictures from his slides. These are kind of the early versions of those do-it-yourself systems. So you can see the Medtronic pump here. So that's given to them by the pump company. Their doctor prescribed it, but then they did all the stuff on the right where they fiddled around, did some soldering, did some coding, and made it automate. And they were able to tell the Medtronic pump to do things like raise and lower their insulin based on the equations that they kind of wrote. So yeah, we've come a long way. Don't look at the text. We've just come a long way since then. It's been about 12 years since that kind of happened. Now we can use pumps like the Omnipod Dash with looping, and now it lives on the phone instead of that device kind of contraption that you saw there on the right. Yeah, and then I did want to point out as well, BC Diabetes did start with looping back in 2019. So we, by all means, don't own this. BC Diabetes does not own Loop at all. We did design it. We just take that code from online and download it and help our patients get set up with it. I also wanted to highlight here on the right, back in 2023, the open source system Loop did get FDA approved in one form called Tidepool Loop. A company did decide, actually, that's a really great algorithm. We don't have to do very much work ourselves. We just have to kind of get it approved, get through the bureaucracy of it all, and they did get it approved in the US. So you can get it prescribed by a doctor in the US and use that form of kind of what was previously an open source system. Generally, though, people who see this code online just kind of download it and set it up for themselves. There's tons and tons of studies about these open source kind of like do-it-yourself options on the bottom there. But at BC Diabetes, I think we have about 3,000 patients on some sort of do-it-yourself system. So we definitely have the most data about it, and we can attest it's very, very safe, very reliable. So when we say open source, it's any software where you can see all the code online. No one is hiding it. It's for everyone to kind of collaborate on. Anyone can suggest improvements, People try it, send out their feedback, and then eventually, if it's a really good idea, lots of people like it, it gets incorporated into kind of the main code repository there. When you build it, you can pick and choose what you want. You can go through all of it. Because it's open source, it doesn't have to go through Health Canada or big corporate approval before people start using it. So that's where we get a lot of the most innovation. But like I said, we have tons of data on it. We know it's very safe, very reliable, and just as safe as reliable as the commercial options, just not officially Health Canada approved because no one's gotten that money together. Okay, so after 12 years of collaboration, testing, feedback from people all over the world, we do have several options within the open source space as well. So Loop, this kind of green icon here, and also shown on the left, a screenshot shown on the left, that's what it looks like to run Loop. That's the most common system out there. It's the one for PC diabetes that we default to installing for people the most. Right now, really the only pump at play with these open source systems is the Omnipod Dash. So with these systems, all the code is online, but the stuff that actually gives you your insulin, we apply that code to pumps that are given to us by pump companies. So your doctor still prescribe these non-automated pumps. The only one really still at play is Omnipod Dash, just because Omnipod Aeros is getting phased out this year. The older Medtronic pumps that were first hacked, you can't get them anymore in North America. So in North America, our best option is Omnipod Dash. Some other like international pumps work as well. But you can see these 4 options for apps. There's also tons of like little branches, but these are the main ones. This is what it kind of looks like to run all these systems. So the 3 on the left are Loop, Trio, and IAPS, and these are systems that you can run on iPhone. On Android, unfortunately, there's only one option out there, AAPS, or Android Artificial Pancreas System. We'll kind of deep dive into these in a second. But this is just a screens, what it looks like to run them. You do all your bolusing on your phone. You just have your sensor, phone, and pod, and that'll automate your insulin. You're not using that kind of controller that comes with the Omnipod Dash anymore. So that's a really nice thing. You do have to be within Bluetooth range of your phone because your phone's kind of the brains of the operation. But otherwise, you have automated insulin with your dash that comes from the company and the software that we build or you build yourself. All right, so I won't go into this too much. Again, a lot of text that I don't want you to necessarily read, but this is in the slides if you wanted to refer to them later. This is kind of the stuff that Terry touched upon last time. So kind of just a comparison between all the commercial systems out there. I did want to highlight just some main points. So compared to the open source systems, you're going to see a lot less targets with these. So target would be kind of what you tell the system you want your blood sugar to hover at. You have a lot less freedom with what you can set there. For example, you can see for the Omnipod 5 and Tandem system, the lowest target is around a 6.3. And that's why we wouldn't use them with someone who's pregnant, for example, because you need really, really tight targets for pregnancy. Otherwise, Ypsomed does offer some really great options for targets, but then it's a matter of kind of hardware there as well. So you can see some of these systems don't have certain CGMs compatible. Coverage is also an issue with some of these. So some have the pump covered, but not the tubing. So yeah, tons of limitations, but then as well, the benefit is that you have less settings to look at. So the settings that can impact automation are only a few. For Omnipod 5, for example, really it's the target that you can adjust that'll actually impact automation. Everything else is just if you manually bolus. So if you change your carb ratio, for example, the automated corrections that the system gives you doesn't necessarily work to be better. You kind of have to rely on the system's own learning to do that. Some people like that, some people don't because of that simplicity. Okay, I'll skip over pharmacare coverage as well, but then I can go back to it if anyone has a question about it. But for comparison of the automated systems out there that are open source, so again, Loop, IAPS, Trio, and AAPS. Again, if you don't want to, don't have to look too much at the details, but essentially with the parameters beyond, and this is beyond things like basal rates, carb ratios, that kind of pump settings that you're used to, you can adjust very specifically with each of these systems as well. So with these kind of more advanced systems, the IAPS, Trio, and AAPS, you can adjust even the size of each little correction you get. So if the system thinks you need 1 unit, you can tell it, actually, I never want you to give me a bolus beyond 0.5 units, and I want you to spread everything else out. You can be that specific with it. Otherwise, you can say, I want corrections every 10 minutes or every 5 minutes. But then with these systems, with the commercial systems, for example, if you're on the Tandem, you're kind of stuck with the big correction every hour for that. So lots of freedom with these looping systems, these open source automated systems. The targets can be quite flexible as well. You can set them really, really low. You can also set them really high. You can say during this part of the day, I want a target of 8, but then at night, I want a target of 6. So kind of those sleep modes, activity modes you might be used to on the other automated systems, but you're not stuck with what they give you for those. Within the adjustments for insulin, say you're active, you know you generally need half your insulin if you're active and you're high to be corrected back down to your target. You can say, actually, during this time, I want my corrections to be even more spaced out. So you have lots of freedom with exactly how the algorithm behaves in a way that the commercial systems don't allow you to do. Otherwise, there's lots of exciting advanced features as well. So this is really kind of the playground for like innovation in the insulin pump space. A lot of these features get kind of trialed on people who are really willing to be bleeding edge and kind of at the forefront of innovation with diabetes. And then big pump companies see that it's been well tested. They're like, oh, that's a great idea. Then they have to go into their testing and incorporate it into their algorithms. So with what we have right now, IAPS, Trio, AAPS all have some sort of dynamic ISF function. So if you're someone who has seen, if you're at a blood sugar of 10, your correction factor tells you that to get back to a blood sugar of 6, that's a 4-unit drop, you need 1 unit of insulin. So then ideally, if you're using that same correction factor, going from a 14 to a 10, still a 4-unit drop, should also take 1 unit of insulin. If you're someone who realizes at those higher blood sugar ranges, actually it takes double that insulin, these systems are going to be really great for you because you can vary that correction factor based on how high your blood sugar is. So you can really ramp things up if you get into those like really stubborn highs. If you're someone who likes to get into those numbers and really nitpick at those, these systems are definitely for you. There's also the concept of super bolusing, which I was not aware of until a patient actually told me about super bolusing. Some patients like to do a really, really great big bolus at the beginning of their meal and then take some of their basal away from the rest of the next 2 hours, for example, up front with that bolus, instead of kind of doing the calculations in your head like you would have to do with the other systems, like commercial systems out there. Some of these have that built in. As well, there's protein and fat bolusing. It isn't necessary for everyone to count their proteins and fats to make their insulin work, but there is an option to kind of split that up if you're that kind of person. Yeah, so just kind of an overview of whether open source or commercial is going to be better for you. The device matters a lot. So with these commercial systems, again, it comes right out of the box already automating. You don't have to like fiddle around with it at all. With the commercial systems, you do have to consider, like if you're someone who doesn't have a smartphone, open source is definitely not for you. If you're not comfortable with using a smartphone, open source is just so reliant on it, you really can't get around it. Otherwise, commercial options do have all these different great options for extra devices, but it also does come with at least like the pump with tubing, or it comes with a controller device that you have to use with the system, at least here in Canada. If you're someone who wants just the pump sensor and your phone, you carry your phone around with you all the time, and you want that to be where your algorithm's based, open source is going to be really fantastic for you. If you stay within Bluetooth range all the time, that's going to be really great. But for someone who leaves their phone away from them all the time, doesn't really get those sensor readings consistently, that's where open source will kind of fail. Otherwise, there are really exciting options in open source as well for remote bolusing. So with Loop, if your child is on Loop, for example, you're able to bolus them from your phone with an app called Loop Caregiver. So that's really great. It comes with risks, of course, sending like a bolus through the internet to your child's phone. But if you're someone whose child is homeschooled because they can't read, they can't put in those numbers themselves. If you're outside of BC, there's no nursing support, so no one's coming in and doing those boluses. So you had to have them stay at home or run to their school to do boluses for them. That can be a really great option for you. That's not available in the commercial space. Otherwise, for temporary settings, the way that you like to approach your diabetes really matters here. Commercial is a lot more one size fits all. So you say, okay, it's activity. That one size fits all activity mode is going to be what I put on. Versus if you're someone who's going to say, I need 30% when I'm going on a run. I need 80% of my insulin when I'm weightlifting. And I need 130% when I'm sick. These open source systems are going to be great for you because you can fiddle around with all that. Otherwise, with open source, you can also say, I want only 10 basals and not big corrections when I'm in activity mode. So you can mess with the algorithm that way too. With settings adjustment, a lot of the commercial systems will tune themselves, but it also means all the settings are under the hood. You and your endo don't have as much to adjust, but there's also less you can adjust. So if you're the type to say, okay, it's doing its thing, I never want to look at my pump settings, these commercial systems might be a little better for you. With open source, there are some kind of like learning options for the pump to work to make itself better, but you should still have some concept of how those settings work because they are quite experimental. Otherwise, your endo might not know the most about these open source systems just because there's no company sending out educators about this system. If you're someone who loves to fiddle and tweak, open source is for you. If you want the opportunity to be a test subject for everything that's coming out, open source is for you. Otherwise, the tech issue, if you come across an issue with pairing your pod, this is where the commercial and open source spaces differ the most. With commercial, you get that 24/7 hotline. You need to call tech support right away. You can call in the middle of the night and get someone on the phone. Whereas with these open source systems, there's tons of resources online if you're the type to go look online for help. If you can fiddle around with your Bluetooth, you're probably okay, especially with BC Diabetes on the phone, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Or worst case, you revert back to injections. If you cannot panic and do that, you're going to be fantastic on open source as well. Okay, so if you're kind of convinced you think open source is a great space to be in, what's next for you? If you're on MDI, ask your endo, get started on Pod Dash, and then you can either choose to self-build Loop or be supported by BC Diabetes, so you don't have to deal with like the coding of it all, and we'll follow along and help teach you about settings as well. If you're on a pump right now, it does get a little more complicated with like warranties and coverage in the picture, so you might want to find out your pump warranty. Some competitor intake discounts are available. So for example, if you switch from Omnipod to a Tandem pump or a Tandem to an Omnipod, they sometimes have discounts that you can make use of. You're not paying the full price of that new pump. And then once you're on an Omnipod Dash or open source, you can either self-build or go to BC Diabetes as well. A bit of a self-plug here. If you're open to either trying Omnipod 5 or Loop and you're really interested in the tubeless options, you have coverage for both, and you're kind of thinking, well, I don't really mind being on either. I'd love to try it out. I do have a kind of study that's pending right now before ethics, but we're working on it. It's called Oliver for Omnipod 5 versus Loop, just because there's not a lot of great studies putting them head to head in a space where people aren't building it for themselves. So if you're interested, there's the link as well to kind of see what's coming out about that. And then last kind of thing I wanted to leave you guys with, for any automated system, whether it's open source or commercial, there are ways that you can make yourself the most prepared you can be. And that would be to focus in on those things that can go wrong with automation. So the only things that can go wrong with automation are kind of things that are inherent to pumps and diabetes care in general. So with pump failure, you always want to have your backup supplies. If your pod is leaking, your pump's probably not going to know that. If your CGM is reading at 10, but you're at a 3, your pump's not going to know that. So recognizing those signs and knowing how to take care of those things are still super important on automated insulin. Those are the only things that we see go wrong on automation. Otherwise, your blood sugar should just improve. Otherwise, pre-bolusing and carb counting is still really important. So if you really wanted to dial in on that, it's super, super helpful for adjusting your settings and doing well on automated insulin. And the last thing is to take your time with all these options. There's tons out there, tons of resources out there as well. I left you guys with a few, but lots of people have tried all these systems, have compared them. Diabetes Tech actually has his own kind of video comparing those. He's a tech reviewer, but just in the diabetes world. So he's really great for looking at those resources. Loop and Learn is a really great resource for Loop in general. It's kind of like Loop huddles. They get together, have like little meetings talking about like the ins and outs of Loop. Lots of patients have done really well with those. These are the official documentations for Loop, IAPS, Trio, and AAPS. And then overall, just read discussion. There's tons of people comparing the systems, lots of people saying what worked or didn't work for them. Overall, I just encourage you to be like really critical about what you're seeing online, really skeptical about if one pump company is telling you actually Tandem's the best out there. This is always going to work for you. I encourage you to kind of find out for yourself and see what's coming out. All right, that's all I have. Yeah, ready for any questions you guys want to throw at me. Oh, Dr. Tang, I think you're still muted there. Oh, Dr. Tang, I think you're still muted.
Sorry, I didn't. All right, so there were a bunch of questions that were pre-submitted, and I'm going to read them. And some of the questions are kind of, there's two parts, so I'll let you know. So question number one. If already using a commercially available AID system like Tandem Control 4, is it worth the hassle of switching to a purpose-built loop?
So really great question. Lots of people having that question because we're so much more involved in Loop now. And then also the other way around. If I'm on Loop, is it worth switching to Omnipod 5 now that it's out? Both of the systems are kind of down to personal preference with, like I said, with these open source systems, you can really, really dial in on your numbers. So if you're on Tandem and it's not working out for you, we have lots of patients who try Tandem and decided it's just not giving them what they need and they try Loop and love it. So while I can't guarantee Loop is the right choice for you, it is worth exploring. If you wanted to, you can always set up an appointment to kind of talk about that, talk about your options, and talk with your local team about that as well. Kind of see what's failing for the Tandem and what other systems might offer that Tandem doesn't.
Okay, and second part to this question, before I invite the person to follow up, is how would you proceed in determining if it's worth the effort of relearning and fine-tuning a more customized experience with the ease of staying with what already works reasonably well, even if it has its inconveniences?
Yeah. So that comes down to what you're willing to do for better blood sugars and whether or not that's worth it for you. So we have clinical guidelines for what's considered good diabetes control out there. So 70% and above time in range, you're not having excessive lows, and then also like an A1C of around 6.5. But that's clinical guidelines. If you're achieving that, but you're thinking, I'm having too many lows overnight, my system's not working, and you've tried all the adjustments, or you're just hovering high for you yourself, you feel better when you have 80% time in range, maybe exploring a more specific option is going to be better for you. But if you're at 75% time in range, life is pretty good. You have highs sometimes, and you really couldn't be bothered to really focus on your diabetes all the time just to get that last 5% towards 80%, then maybe it's just not worth it. We're always trying to balance quality of life with, the numbers here, right? So yeah.
The person who submitted that question, if you're on screen, would you like to follow up? Next question. For the OREF, that's our acronym, based algorithms like TRIO, AAPS, the DIA stands for duration of insulin action, is often recommended to be longer than standard to account for the long tail when introducing multiple SMBs based on David Buren modeling. TRIO currently even defaults to 10-hour DIA for both rapid and ultra-rapid formulations. In AAPS, I opted to split the difference and set my DIA to 8 with Humalog. Do you know if there's any wider data that supports that longer DIA when SMBs are at play? Apologies for all those acronyms.
Yeah, I'm also pulling up the question here on my end to make sure I address everything there. But for OREF-based algorithms, that the duration of insulin action is a really hotly contested subject online within the open source community and also just with healthcare providers, because pump trainers are so used to setting those duration of insulin actions at 4 hours. Oh, by the way, for anyone who's new to automated insulin, you don't have to know any of this to get started at all. So anyways, for people who really want the specifics, yeah, so lots of people have experimented with open source, have set their durations of insulin action at different times for different insulins. I remember seeing a blog post of someone experimenting with their duration of insulin action with all the different insulins, and then they also combined different insulins and tried all that. So in the end, most systems start at a 5-hour duration of insulin action as their kind of default as their minimum, just because people are comfortable with those shorter times with what they know from before. By all means, experiment by yourself, extend that a little bit. At BC Diabetes, for example, we're not really in the practice of fiddling around with that. We set it kind of the same for every patient, just because we feel like the other settings can usually be tuned up on a lot more than those really micro adjustments. So for patients who haven't been kind of consistently putting in carbs or are still working on their carb counting, we're really not concerned about the duration of insulin action being specific to them as well. So yeah, we don't have a whole lot of experience of pulling out that duration of insulin action. There's tons about it online, but the consensus is that 5-hour or longer does work better than the 4 hours that's traditionally described.
Okay, the person who submitted that question, would you like to follow up?
Hey, sorry about the excessive acronym nerdery.
Oh my gosh.
Also, hopefully my signal's okay. I'm
Yeah,
just coming out
yeah,
of a spin class.
yeah. I recognize that
Hi,
voice.
Rachel.
Hello.
It's me, full of nerdery whatnot. Yeah, just
Yeah.
wondering if there had been any, like, since, you have such a breadth of patients on the
Yeah.
different algorithms.
Hmm.
Yeah, I set mine for 8. It seems all right. I don't know how
Yeah.
much that's being compensated by other settings anyway,
Yeah.
so I don't know how
Yeah.
critical it is, but
Exactly. It's just really hard to narrow down on that while you have all these other settings at play. As well, like you're right, in the automation, like the open source space, we definitely have the most data out there, but doesn't mean we've looked at every single little thing, which like, I wish we could
valid.
really dig into. But yeah, so I would test by maybe just like if you're in manual mode, you can really tell by kind of watching the peak of like one insulin bolus with your basal if you've tuned up your basal really, really tightly. But again, like, is one test going to get you that information? Probably not. And then is it worth being in out of automation for that long? Probably not. Keep experimenting, but I'm sure your time and range is fantastic.
Okay, next question. As an AAPS user, the system is often only as strong as my CGM is reliable. Because I found that the Dexcom G7 can be noisy for the first 24 hours, I try and pre-soak slash overlap a new sensor for the full 12-hour grace period, and then use the maximum smoothing within AAPS. Exponential rather than average, with the trade-off that interstitial fluid is already lagging blood glucose by at least 10 minutes. So you have less reactivity if a sudden jump in value is legitimate after feeding through the X strip. Do you think it's worth soaking slash overlapping a full 24 hours instead of enabling less aggressive smoothing?
Yes, the answer is yes. Just because the what's happening for all those that aren't like heard all those words, um, with these algorithms and with the commercial pumps as well, sometimes it doesn't just take your glucose value as it's said. If there's a lot of noise, these open source systems are really a lot more aggressive at smoothing them out to what they think they should be. I'm sure you've had like wonky sensors that are just like kind of all over the place. Like, what do you mean I'm at a 10? And then suddenly I'm at a 5. It doesn't ignore those values, it just kind of smooths them out. Um, I would say, I mean, I'm sure the Dexcom people and doctors have something else to say about this. Usually, the margin of error for your sensor is probably a lot less than you're thinking. Obviously, there are sensor errors, but pre-soaking and getting that actual value calculated from your sensor is probably going to be more accurate than something that like the math came up with. So finger poke, check your sensor, go back to diabetes basics. But yeah, soaking has lots of data about it. That's known to work better than the experimental algorithms that we're working with.
Okay, I suspect the person who asked that question was the person who posed the previous question. But if that isn't true, would the person who posed this question like to follow up?
It is indeed also me. Yeah, validating that.
I got your
Yeah,
number.
I started off just being kind of cheap about it and doing 6 hours, but I still found like up
Yeah.
until 12 hours, it was a little
Yeah.
jumpy. And there's no point doing any like calibration that early because then
Yeah.
you're telling it that this inflammatory environment is totally
Exactly.
normal. So
Yes,
12
absolutely.
plus seems the winner. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So with the pilot studies when these CGMs and like Dexcom first came out, like pretty much every CGM out there, the first 24 hours is where they notice like the biggest kind of margin of error. So we say to soak for like 12 hours because past that, really like who wants to have their new sensor on for 24 hours without using it? You have a whole like 12 to 24 hours left on your CGM, right? But that's what the data shows. If you wanted to, if you're that person, sure, go for it. Um, yeah, otherwise, you're exactly right. Calibrating that early is not good. So just a word about calibration out there. Dr. Clayton, the clinic loves to say that he has been to the Dexcom factory. He's talked to the engineers there. They actually hate the calibration option just because you're introducing another variable into the mix. With Dexcoms, like, if you're finger poking and you're thinking, hey, why does my Dexcom not reflect that? Your blood sugar calculated from your blood is going to be different from what your CGM is measuring, just because of that. It's measuring different things. So it's measuring the fluid in between your cells rather than your actual blood. There's some delay in that in itself. And then, if your finger's dirty or whatever, your glucometer is probably not going to be the most accurate either. So I'd advise against calibrating unless it's super, super wrong. Maybe just watch it, change out the sensor if need be. But yeah, sensor soaking at the beginning of the lifespan is a really, really good strategy.
All right, the next question, I understand. Any guesses if tandem pumps will be added to BC Pharmacare?
Yeah, so Dr. Elliott's guess is as good as mine. Right now, it's not looking promising because they just did like a pretty big pharmacare revamp and reevaluation. So we kind of did get news about that April 1st. So Omnipod has been Omnipod 5 has been newly covered. Tandem, it's not looking like any changes so far. Our Tandem reps are pretty hush-hush about it as well, and they're not looking like they don't see any changes coming. Yeah.
Okay, did the person who submitted that question want to follow up? All right, next question. Currently on loop with the G7, when I get signal loss, how do I know if this is a pod issue or a loop issue?
So if you're on loop and you're getting pod signal loss. So if that signal loss is actually in that like little pod icon on the top right, it is kind of hard to tell, but you do your usual like Bluetooth troubleshooting protocol. So you make sure you're close to your phone within that like Bluetooth range. You're next to it for about 10-15 minutes, give it a chance. Then you restart all the apps, just making sure you've done all you can about the app. You've restarted your phone. I will say pod connection issues on loop on iPhone are extremely rare. So I would suspect it's more of like a kind of you moving kind of too far from your phone, or the actual like individual pod has an issue. If it exists beyond 15 minutes, at that point, just change out your pod. We'd rather you like change out the pod and test it. If it happens for like 2 pods in a row, then I'd start to suspect it's a loop issue. Call BC Diabetes or check the forums to see if there's any like known issues about pods. Again, there's tons of people out there. So if everyone's having the issue, there's going to be some talk about it on those like Facebook groups and Discord groups as well.
Okay, did the person who submitted that question like to follow up? Next question, will MSP cover any mishaps or hospitalization that may occur if someone is on such open source, unapproved health treatment?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, it's still insulin. You're still injecting insulin. You're with diabetes using insulin. We haven't had any experiences where like the hospital was like, nope, this is an open source system. We're not going to treat you anymore. MSP is not going to cover you. So it's still a medical emergency with your diabetes. I'm sure there's some like medical legalities that I'm not aware of like in what I've seen, but talk to your endo is like at the end of the day is the best way to go about it, but not that we've heard of. Yeah, MSP is pretty forgiving on all medical emergencies.
Okay, would the person who submitted that like to follow up? Next question, when will Simplera Sync be available in BC? I'm currently on MiniMed 780G and Dexcom 7. My controls are good, but it is in my head all the time, adjusting and checking 24 hours a day. Love to go on Tandem unless Simplera Sync is best.
Okay, so in terms of when it's coming out, we don't have a strict timeline. We were told like maybe later this year. For yeah, so for those that don't know as well, right now the Medtronic pump works with just their proprietary Guardian sensor. The Simplera would be another one that's already available in the States and is coming out in Canada. If you're like, it's definitely an option that's coming out by the end of, hopefully by the end of the year is what we've been told. I think, sorry, I'm just reading for the second part of the question as well. Currently I'm a MiniMed and Dexcom. Yeah, so with the Dexcom, you can't automate the MiniMed, right? And I know tons of people hate the Guardian sensor. Yeah, so switching to a different open source or switching to a different automated system for that compatibility, if you really like the Dexcom, that's definitely worth exploring if your warranty and coverage allows. Unfortunately, we are kind of at the mercy of what is covered and compatibility. So with Simplera, in terms of whether or not it's best, all the CGMs out right now, like Simplera, Libre, Dexcom, Guardian, they all have margins of error in their clinical trials that are pretty similar when you're getting down to those like single digits. I'm recycling this from Dr. Clayton's talk. In single digits, we're getting down to really, really, really specific margins of error. So we don't really expect that one will always work better than others. They're all going to be pretty similar on a population level at least. But if you're someone who hates just like how the Medtronic Guardian feels, you've tried this employer and you don't like it, and you really want to switch to Dexcom and stick with Dexcom and be automated, either commercial or open source systems where Dexcom compatible is definitely worth it. A lot of it is about that quality of life.
Okay, would the person who submitted that question like to follow up? All right, next question. What are some nuanced differences between the AID systems in BC, and how does it impact blood glucose control?
So I'm going to reshare my slides for this. It is this, like, I could talk another hour on this, but with the different systems, how they impact blood sugar control, again, with all of these systems right now at like a really big population level, we're not expecting like the studies to show like really huge differences. So it really comes down to those like minute features and how you like to adjust for things in your life. So for example, if we take a look at the Tandem, it has a 30-minute predictive window. It changes your basal every 5 minutes based on those CGM readings. It gives you a great big bolus every hour. That's about 60% of what you need. So if the system, based on your calculations, thinks you need 2 units to get back down to your target, it's gonna give you like 1.2 units of that instead. And then it'll wait till the next hour to give you a really great big bolus. Whereas if you look at the Omnipod 5, for example, it has a 60-minute predictive window, but then that auto bolus is about every 5 minutes, but it only goes up to 4 times your basal. So it does kind of up that basal. It might be a little bit higher than what basal means to you right now. So it might not be exactly 4 times that, but it's not the same like one big correction bolus that you're used to. So if you want more frequent boluses, maybe Ypsomed's going to be a better option for you. But if you're okay with one big bolus and you like having that one big bolus and watching it, you know the pump's not going to be doing anything crazy in the background, Tandem might be for you. If we're looking at the targets as well, if you're someone who wants to hover just at like a 6.5 all day, any of these systems are going to probably be okay for you. But if you're someone who wants a really tight target, Jerry actually messaged me letting me know that the Tandem is now also approved for pregnancy. So if you're pregnant, only ones approved for pregnancy would be Tandem and Ypsomed currently. So that might also be a factor. Otherwise, if you're prone to kind of like bolusing, only some of the systems allow you to stack boluses on top of what it's already giving you. So some of these systems, if you give it 1 unit on top of what it's already giving you, it's going to pull back. Or like with the Medtronic, it actually doesn't let you bolus on top if it's in that automated mode. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, I don't work at that every day. But then with the Ypsomed, there is that like kind of boost algorithm where you can boost it without having to put in boluses yourself. So it does kind of come down to the individual feature differences. If you want to really dig into it, feel free to schedule an appointment.
Okay, I'm not sure who that was. Oops, is there someone's mic that's on? Oh. Okay, so the person who submitted that question, would you like to follow up? All right, last question. And if you do have questions and you haven't submitted, feel free to just enter them in the chat. The last question I have on my piece of paper is, how can we get support in Calgary if we wanted to try this?
So the beauty of open source is that it's available to anyone, anywhere. So if you wanted to go online, search up how to build it yourself, that's fantastic. BC Diabetes is also not limited to BC. So we actually see patients from all over Canada. We're the only like big clinic in Canada that's getting people onto Loop. We have some affiliate ones that are helping out as well. So yeah, if you wanted to have clinic supported open source for these like automated options, then BC Diabetes is kind of the way to go. But if you're techie, want to set it up yourself and want support later, we're here to help later as well. But if you're,
Okay, did you want me to read the?
Oh, it's okay. I thought they might be related, but I'll keep going ahead. Anyways, yes, so with support outside of the province, we're happy to do that as well. Yeah, if you want to kind of tackle setting it up, you can always give it a try. If you want support, we're here as well.
The person from Calgary, are you on screen? And if you are, would you like to follow up?
Do you have to have an endo approve the tandem, or do you have to go through an endo who doesn't want us to go on a pump? How would that work? Or
So if you're currently on MDI, haven't tried a pump ever, or on a different pump and
yeah,
want to switch over to a
yeah,
different pump, any of the commercial options, the beauty of it is that your local endo is going to be able to help you out with that. If you're sure that's kind of your way to go, the
mhm.
MiniMed, Tandem, Ypsomed, and Omnipod 5, your local diabetes team is going to be really good at helping you get started. For the open source systems, if you're interested, even if you want to be referred to BC Diabetes, I mean, we can have a chat about it like in a consultation with BC Diabetes, so get your endo to refer you to us. And if you decide loop is for you, we would want you to get started on Omnipod Dash before we apply these softwares to your phone. So Omnipod Dash, your local endo would want to send out that order.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In the chat, we have, I thought tandem target is set to 6.1. Am I misunderstanding your slide?
I think it can be set to 6.1. It might be a typo in there that you've caught. So thank you for that. Yeah. I was looking at the Panther tools as well, one word of warning as well, which might be why that target came about, is if you refer to the Panther tool, which is a great organization that compares all the automated systems, they do work in American units. So yeah, us Canadians have to kind of convert and or dig around in other sources that aren't as compiled.
Okay, so this question was already answered, but I'm just going to repeat it. What does pre-soaking a Dexcom sensor refer to? I mean, it was answered right below, but I figured you might want to verbally.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. So, yeah, so again, a lot of people find that when they first insert a sensor in, it's a little less accurate than maybe 24 hours after they've first put it in. So, whether it's like inflammation around the site or just take some time to settle in there, lots of people have found that if you, especially if you're using the Dexcom, you still have your old sensor on, maybe it's in like the last 12 hours of its cycle, it hasn't quite expired yet. You can pop a new sensor on and don't kind of pair it to your phone yet. You leave your old one paired to your phone, but the new one's just kind of sitting in your skin or soaking in there. Sometimes just having it settle in there for 12 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours can help it start reading more accurately once you do pair it to your phone. Yeah.
Okay, Faith, did you want to go ahead and ask Rachel your questions, or I'm happy to read them, but I wasn't sure because.
So for the tandem target, it's 6.1 if you're not using any of the other modes, but there are extra modes like the sleep and then the exercise mode. Some people who want a higher target, they just set their kind of mode overall just at like the exercise mode all day, all night, and then apply their like kind of fiddle around with other settings to compensate. So let's say that exercise mode, I don't know the actual percentage. I'm not sure if it's public information or if I'm just not aware. But with the exercise target, it is like 7.8 to 8.9-ish. And then with the percentage that adjusts your insulin, it's going to be a little bit less for your correction. So you could just make your baseline basal rate stronger, correction factor stronger, everything else stronger, and then use that exercise mode 24/7. Lots of people kind of use that sleep mode as the 6.1 target 24/7 because they find it works a little bit better for them as well. So with the commercial systems, you have to do those little hacks.
What did you mean? Can you hear me? I'm not sure. I've never used
I
my
can, yeah.
earbuds. Okay.
Yeah.
What did you mean when you said set your baseline? Because I want my sugars to be higher because I go low.
Yeah.
And I find I use the exercise mode when I'm exercising as well as, or the activity mode, as well as an exercise profile that I've created. But the exercise mode basically shuts the insulin down between I think high 6 and mid 7 or something.
Yeah.
I don't really want it to shut it down, but I want it to somehow,
Exactly.
like 6.1 I find very low.
Yeah. So
I
for
know
those
that seems
exercise
weird.
targets,
Yeah.
it does still do some automation, but it just doesn't give you those like big boluses. So if you're hoping for like a higher target, but also still big boluses, then think one of the other, like this is where kind of the commercial systems do kind of break down in terms of what's possible with them. I also, good opportunity to say, again, I'm not a nurse, not a doctor, so take with this what you will. So talk to your local endo about it, talk to your diabetes team, but just like in terms of the technical bits, that's what someone might do is put themselves in exercise mode, but just make all their settings super, super strong past what they would usually be to maybe fiddle around with that. Otherwise, like if you really want a higher target, but you want those boluses to behave differently, that would be a reason that you would consider a different system.
Okay, so
Or
you're
wait for new things coming out because Tandem
Yeah.
is also updating its algorithms. Yeah.
Okay, so you're suggesting then that if I want to stay using the activity setting, then I could fiddle around with the additional settings.
Unfortunately,
Don't
I have
worry,
no.
don't
Yeah,
worry, you don't need to qualify that. I totally get it.
yeah. Thank you, Faith.
I fiddle around with my settings
Sure. I would
quite a
highly
bit.
recommend you talk to your local team about that. But if you're weakening something, you might have to strengthen something else. Yeah.
Okay, super. Thanks so much. Appreciate that. And this is all very
Yeah.
interesting because I've been on Tandem and Dexcom for a long time. This is
Yeah.
very interesting for me. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. No problem.
Taranjiv, would you like to go ahead and ask your question? I can read it, but I figure you might want to ask it. All right, I'll go ahead and read it. For people using open source AID systems, this is a critical concern. If someone experiences a diabetes-related hospitalization while using an open source system, could this create challenges with provincial health insurance coverage or with private travel insurance claims? I would appreciate clarification from the panel.
Yeah. So again, I think I did kind of touch on this earlier as well, but and another kind of thing, I have no qualifications, like legal qualifications to be talking about this. But from our experience at our clinic, we haven't had anyone have issues with that. Oh, I think Jerry can chime in here, but
Yes, Jerry.
usually at
I am
hospitals, they
going to
don't.
chime in.
Yeah.
With the provincial, you would, if you presented in hospital with a healthcare provider who wasn't used to looping, you would probably just have to come off the pump and go back to MDI. They couldn't refuse saying, no, you've harmed yourself, you're out of luck. They would have to deal with you. And in fact, they couldn't, the standard of care is they've got to support you. With insurance coverage for travel, it is always best to check with your insurance company. I've had some insurance companies say that if you go on a pump, you can't travel for a year unless you increase your insurance. And others say that's absolutely no problem. The lady said that she was looping. So it's very much according to your insurance company and according to the plan with that particular one.
I think also one thing I forgot to highlight on my slides as well in 2025, both the American Diabetes Association and Diabetes Canada, so both authorities on like what we should be doing in the US and in Canada in terms of like healthcare providers treating diabetes, what's the standard of care? They did say that these open source systems should be supported in clinic. So that's kind of like a little more validation for using these open source systems as well. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, it is 6:59, and I usually promise or like to promise that we'll end on time. Thank you so much, Rachel, for such a great talk.
Can I ask one more question?
Of course.
Yeah. Sorry, Rachel, I'm already on the loop. So based on what I know, I was told that BC Diabetes doesn't install any AID on that loop. Is that correct?
We do default to loop, and we would very much hesitate to do anything other than loop just because loop works up like is the most simple, is the most supported, has the most data. With IAPS and Trio, we would definitely consider it if you're looking for more advanced features. We do install loop or Trio and IAPS for some patients for sure, and we're doing some experimenting. Yeah.
And actually when I had because when I was looking into some technical kind of papers, I heard about these features that you said when for example, the blood sugar is higher, when you want to lower it, you need more insulin than when it is, for example. But as far as does loop has this feature or not?
Exactly. So Loop on iPhone, the one with the green circle, that one doesn't have exactly that feature. It has some other ones that kind of work around that. So one's called glucose-based partial application, one's called integral retrospective correction, advanced algorithm features that you can tick on or off. So talk to your technologist about that. They'll be able to help you out.
So you
Yeah.
have to, sorry, wait a moment, please. Yeah, I have to use the headphone to
Sure.
hear
No
clearly.
problem.
So if you
Yeah.
can please repeat, because again, one of the papers that I read, the discussion was that the loop doesn't have this feature and the other ones they have. But
Yeah.
you say the loop has this feature.
It has something adjacent to those features. So
what's that?
so
Sorry.
it doesn't really change your ISF. It always uses your ISF as is in your settings. But there's two features that you might want to talk to your technologist about.
What is ISF?
Insulin sensitivity factor. So yeah. So with glucose-based partial application, it can give you more of your dose up front, but it's still using the same ISF. So if it thinks you need 1 unit, it's still going to think you want 1 unit, but maybe it can give you 0.8 of that instead of its usual 0.4. But then integral retrospective correction, if you've been high for a longer time, it's allowed to ramp up your corrections a little bit more than the usual algorithm, but it's still using that same ISF.
So automatic, it does it, or I have to fix it in some of the setting?
Yeah, you have to check those two algorithm features on. So
sorry, is it okay to tell me right now I'm on the loop, or is it not?
I think you'll have to tell your technologist and have them guide you through it.
Okay,
because for any settings changes, I need an endo to check off. So,
okay. I email him and ask him. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. But then just to explain for everyone else as well, the dynamic ISF features are where you really get the big change. Only IAPS, Trio, and AAPS have something like those features. AAPS, their dynamic ISF is a little bit different. It's more of a learning and calculating your ISF, but the other ones can really scale up your ISF as you get higher.
And if I didn't get my answer, I'm gonna email you directly.
No problem. If you email questions for everyone out there who is a patient,
I'm gonna email my technician in BC Diabetes.
For sure. But if you email questions at bcdiabetes.ca, if you're a patient with us already, then the question often gets sent to the entire technologist group. So whoever is available.
So I just send it to BC just directly, not a specific person.
You can if you want a faster answer. If you want someone who's familiar with your case, then probably your technologist.
So I just said the same email without putting a name, so everybody can look at it.
Sure.
Yeah, that's the way I'm asking. That's the way it is. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel, and thanks everyone for taking an hour out of your evening to join us. We're lucky to have Rachel. I think she's probably not only the expert in BC, but maybe all of Canada, because I don't know anyone who knows so much about this other than Dr. Elliott. So thanks again, and please join us next month. We're going to probably be talking about mental health and introducing you to our newest mental health providers trained in diabetes. Thanks. Have a nice night.